This story happened my junior year of high school. Our school started pretty early in the morning, and I always had a very hard time getting up. Occasionally, I would say about once a month, I would sleep in and miss the bus. That meant I had to ask my mother to drive me to school on her way to work. She didn't mind, but was always a little disappointed. On this one particular occasion, I overslept by a lot and missed the bus. My class had already started, so I got my mom to drive me to school. When I got to school, I went to the front door and had to show my school ID to be let in. They then gave me a pass to get to my class. But I really hated walking into my class late and disrupting it. I always thought that was embarrassing, so what I would always do instead was go to my favorite bathroom, which was the least busiest one upstairs, and then wait inside the bathroom until my class was over. Then I would walk out during passing time, and nobody would know I had been late. It's weird, I know, but I was a shy and awkward kid back then. On this particular day, when I arrived at the bathroom, I was disappointed to see that it was being cleaned by a janitor. I walked down the hall to a nearby storage room that I knew was rarely used. I went inside and shut the door. I went to the wall and went behind a few boxes of equipment. Then I took out my phone and my headphones to pass the time remaining of class, which was roughly about 10 minutes. Finally, class time was over, and I emerged from the closet and back into the halls of the school. But when I did, the halls were empty. I walked to one of the main hallways nearby, which was always very crowded during passing time, but there was still nobody there at all. I double-checked my watch and the time on my phone several times to make sure the time was correct. It was very confusing to me, until I realized that we had to be on a lockdown of some sort. It was the only thing that made sense. As I approached a corner, I heard footsteps. I didn't know if this was a drill or if it was the real deal, but I did know I could get in trouble for being found in the halls, so I went back to the storage closet I had been hiding in. I made it back without being seen by whoever the footsteps belonged to. However, I heard them keep coming closer. I turned off the lights in the room and went back to hiding behind some boxes. I heard the footsteps get closer and closer, and then stop at the door. My heart was pounding as I hoped the door wouldn't open, but then it did. I tried my best to not make any noise at all. I couldn't see what was going on at all, but I knew the door had been opened, and someone was in there with me. The room was not all that big, and I'm guessing they were about 15 feet away from me. Each second that went by while I was in there felt like a minute. I heard nothing at all, but I could see light in the room, and the door was still open. I also hadn't heard anybody walk away. I was so scared that I thought about just giving myself up, hoping that it was somebody on the school staff that was in there. But I had a strong feeling that it wasn't, and I kept silent. Finally, I heard the footsteps walk back to the door and leave. I stayed in the room and laid in the same position for at least another 15 minutes or so. Finally, I could barely hear an announcement come over the school intercom, followed by the sound of students walking down the hallway. I then came out of my hiding place and joined in with the rest of the students. I found a few of my friends and asked them what happened. They told me all they heard was that a suspicious man had been arrested in our school. I went about the rest of my day at school just like any other, and I never told anybody what I had experienced. This happened around 5 years ago. I was in 8th grade at the time and in middle school. It was a normal day in the 5th period when I needed to go to the bathroom. I asked my teacher if I could go to the bathroom, and she said yes. I walked out of the classroom and down the hall. When I got to the bathroom, I went into a stall and closed the door. After about 30 seconds, I heard the door to the bathroom open. I thought it was another student, so I stayed quiet and I heard the person's shoes on the floor. They sounded like boots. I was a little curious because not many people wore boots at our school. The person didn't even go into a stall. He just stood outside by the door. I looked under the stall door and saw that it was a fully grown man standing by the door. He saw me look and then walked to my stall. He started banging on it, and I got super freaked out. Then he stopped. After about 2 minutes, I heard the bathroom door open and the man leave. I went to call my friend, but as soon as I unlocked my phone, the intercom came on. The person over the intercom told us there was a high-level lockdown and that there was a person in the building who wasn't supposed to be there. I stood on the toilet as we were supposed to do in a lockdown if we were in the bathroom. I stood there for 10 minutes or so until the lady on the intercom told us that the lockdown was over. I still wonder to this day if the man in the bathroom was the person who caused the lockdown. It was one of the scariest moments of my life. The story that I'm about to tell you took place when I was in middle school. It was during the spring semester, and it was a day that I had a dentist appointment. I went to my first class of the day, and then got a pass to leave the school and go to my appointment. My mother was waiting at the front door of the school, and when the time came, drove me to the dentist. I was hoping that my mother would allow me to just go home after my dentist appointment and skip the rest of the school day, but she said no. It was most likely because it was earlier in the day. I got back to school during my third class period. I got let in the front door and then made my way to my classroom, which was on the other end of the school. As I was walking past one of the side doors, I noticed a man wave at me from outside. I don't know what I was thinking, but I walked over to the door and opened it for the man. He smiled and said thanks to me. Then I kept walking to my class. I got to my class, and only about 10 minutes later, we got an announcement that we were in a lockdown. I immediately got a bad feeling remembering the man I had let in. We did what we were supposed to do in a lockdown and went to the back of the classroom and turned all of the lights off. I could tell by how our teacher was acting that it seemed serious. We stayed there for about 30 minutes, and finally the lockdown ended. I heard afterwards that the same man I had let into the building was found hiding in a bathroom with a weapon. Thankfully, nobody was harmed, but I learned a valuable lesson not to let anybody inside. This story happened to me when I was a freshman in high school. It's still the scariest moment of my life. It was about a month into the school year, and it was a Friday. I remember that I was in my second hour class. It was math, and we had a test that day. I was pretty good at math back then, and I was able to finish the test pretty quickly. I felt good about it, and I saw that we still had 30 minutes of class left. I asked the teacher if I could go to my locker to put my math stuff away. She said yes, and I headed out the door. I was in no hurry to get back to class, knowing we wouldn't do anything the rest of the period, so I planned on taking my time going to my locker and back. I walked slowly to my locker, which was on the other end of school. The hallways were completely empty and quiet as I walked through them. I got to my locker and put my books back. I got some gum out of my locker and then started to head back to the classroom. Our school had 2 floors, and I remember that one of my best friends had a class right above the freshman lockers. I went upstairs to wave at him from the hallway, but when I got to his classroom, the door was shut and the lights were off. I figured the class must be in a computer lab or something. When I walked down the rest of the hallway, I noticed that all the classroom doors were shut and the lights were all off. I figured we must be having a lockdown drill. We usually had fire drills and lockdown drills early in the school year. I knew I wasn't supposed to be out in the halls during lockdown drills, so I started to walk back to my math class. After I got down the stairs, I heard footsteps. I didn't want to get in trouble, so I went under the stairs to hide. There was a little area underneath the stairs that was pretty open, but at the same time you couldn't really see from the halls. I saw it was a teacher walking down the halls. He was going pretty fast and had a concerned look on his face. He must have been looking for kids in the halls, is what I thought. He then went back up the stairs. What concerned me was that he actually started to run to go back up the stairs. The thought then occurred to me that maybe this lockdown wasn't a drill. I decided to keep going back to my classroom. I got to the sophomore locker commons, which were just in front of the math hall. But after I walked about 10 feet into the commons, I noticed a man standing in the middle of them with his back to me about 100 feet away. I didn't recognize him, and he wasn't dressed at all like a teacher or a staff member. He had longer hair and was wearing boots with dirty jeans and a black hoodie. He was just standing there looking at one of the lockers. I stood there unable to move for a second. I didn't know if he had heard me or not. I started to turn around to go back when the man punched the locker with his fist and then started to turn around. This stunned me, and I quickly hid behind a row of lockers next to me. He started to walk closer. I ducked down and held my breath. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I heard his footsteps get closer and closer. He then opened up a locker. He sounded to be about 2 rows over from me. I really didn't want to stay there for him to find me, and I made up my mind that I was going to make a run for it. I listened to make sure he was far enough away, but it suddenly got silent. It was silent for what felt like forever. I tried my best not to breathe or move a muscle. Finally, I heard his footsteps start again. They were getting closer. I couldn't take it anymore, and I got out from the lockers and took off running. I ran back the way I came and took a left which led to the front doors. I heard the man's footsteps start pounding on the floor behind me. I ran as fast as I could and didn't look back, all the while hearing him about 20 feet away. Finally, I got to the steps leading to the lunchroom and out to the front door. I sprinted to the front door to see a police car right outside. An officer saw me and the man chasing me and ran in the door and grabbed me, while another officer ran past. The man stopped chasing me and ran the other direction, but didn't make it far as he was caught. I ended up having to answer a lot of questions, but we all got out of school early that day. It turns out the man was on drugs and was trying to break into the lockers to steal things. My teacher and principal weren't even mad at me and were just happy that I was safe.
When I was about 10 years old, me and my family moved from West Palm Beach, Florida to a suburban area outside of Denver, Colorado. We had planned on moving years ago, and we did so as it was getting really expensive to live in Florida no matter where you were. My parents liked Colorado as that's where most of my family lived, and they had also found a really good school for me to go to which had great ratings. I'm not going to mention the name of the school for privacy reasons, but let's just say that it was a fairly new school. It was about 5 miles from our new house, so I could practically walk there without having to rely on any sort of transportation. The new school was far better than the one I originally went to. Nicer students, nicer teachers, and it was very easy for me to talk to new friends. There was one of my teachers, who we'll call Mr. Smith, who was my math teacher, who I really made a great connection with. I hated math, who doesn't, but Mr. Smith made math a lot more fun. He'd be willing to help people in class no matter how many times someone asked, and I'd also like to mention that he was hands down one of the best teachers throughout the school. I only wish I still had him as a teacher after what happened this one day. It was a Friday, which just so happened to be the last day before spring break. I was in my second to last class with my English teacher when our principal came on the speaker and told the school that this was a code red, and that all students should get inside the classroom immediately. I'm pretty sure no one in my class has ever been in a real lockdown before, so we were all huddled in the corner. A few people were so scared that they actually started to cry, thinking they were going to get harmed. My teacher told everyone to be quiet and to not make any noise for any reason. It felt like an eternity sitting in the corner, waiting for the all clear. However, I then began to hear heavy footsteps from down the hall. The only reason as to why I could hear it was because I was the closest to the back door. I didn't know if anyone else heard it, but I looked through the little glass window on the door to see a man dressed in all black. However, I couldn't see his face as he was wearing a hoodie, but I instantly knew that he was up to no good. I didn't know how it happened, but he turned his head toward my direction and must have caught me looking at him from the window. He came right up to the door and started pounding on it. The whole class screamed and cried while the man kept trying to bust down the door. However, I knew there was a slim chance of that, as these doors are bulletproof and meant to be almost impossible to break open from one person. After several bangs and kicks to the door, he had finally given up and walked away. The principal then came back on and said it wasn't all clear. Now, this is where the disturbing part comes in. Apparently, a man had just broken into a nearby gas station and had shot the employee. I later learned that 4 people, 2 of them being teachers, had been shot. One of those teachers was Mr. Smith. I was told that he was escorted to the hospital by paramedics. However, he had unfortunately died in the hospital 2 days later due to loss of blood from the wound. I still have no idea if the man was ever caught or not, but I'd like to think he was. My condolences go out to Mr. Smith's family and relatives. It's really sad to know that such a great person with a happy personality got taken away from a school who adored him.
In my early days of high school, I used to get to school super early in the winter because my older brother had basketball practice before school. I would usually just sit in a spot upstairs that overlooked the east entrance to the school and watch the sun rise. I found it peaceful and relaxing. On this particular day, I noticed a man walk into the school carrying a briefcase. I didn't recognize him as a teacher, so I was trying to figure out who he was. He then walked into the doors and went upstairs. He looked kind of surprised when he saw me staring at him. He smiled at me and told me he was substituting today. We shook hands and he walked away down the hall. After a while, it was time to go to class. My first period was English. About 15 minutes into class, I got a bloody nose. I would get them a lot in the winter with the dry air, and the teacher let me go to the bathroom. I went to the bathroom and held my nose over the sink and waited for it to go away. As I was in the bathroom, I noticed someone was in the far stall. I saw a suitcase on the ground in the stall. Then I remembered where I saw it before. It was the substitute teacher's. I found it really odd that he would take his suitcase into the bathroom with him, and that he would be in the bathroom at all 15 minutes into class when he was supposed to be teaching. After about 2 or 3 minutes, my nose was all better, and I washed my hands and started to head back to class. The man in the stall remained silent and still the entire time I was in the bathroom. I walked back to class and sat down. We started discussing a video we had watched. Not even 10 minutes passed by when the teacher said we were on a lockdown. She turned off all the lights in the room and locked the doors. All of us went into the corner of the room. It was completely silent. The teacher finally told us that a suspicious man was seen walking in the halls of the school. Seconds felt like minutes when we were all sitting there. It didn't take me long to realize who the man probably was. After about 30 minutes, they announced the lockdown was over. I went to the principal's office to report what I saw earlier. I then found out that the man seen in the halls was indeed the same man I had met and seen earlier that day. When a teacher saw him in the halls, he ran the other direction. The police were called and the man was apprehended. The scariest part of this is that they found a gun in his suitcase. It scares me to think how close I came to him when he was hiding in the bathroom.
About 3 years ago, I had just started my senior year in high school. It was most definitely the year I've been looking forward to throughout my high school career. No more bullying, more freedom, fun activities, and one step closer to becoming an adult. I say normal bullying as the school I attended didn't have the nicest students, and when you're a senior, you don't really get picked on as much. I'd also like to mention that our school was located in an area that wasn't so great. What I mean by that was that there would always be reports of break-ins, and sirens would often be heard at least 3 times a week. You get the picture. It was the middle of April, which happened to be the time where all the seniors were getting ready to graduate in June. I was most certainly looking forward to graduation day. No more huge amounts of homework and no more of those low-quality school lunches. One day, I was in school in my pre-calculus class. We were in our class listening to our teacher lecture about what to expect in trigonometry for college when we heard our assistant principal come on the speaker. She said that a nearby homeowner reported a suspicious-looking individual lurking near our school who was possibly armed. Needless to say, the whole school went on lockdown and our teacher told us to follow all lockdown procedures. Our class had this big closet, now enough for at least 20 people, so our teacher told us to hide in there until the all clear. We all hid in the closet, waiting for something to happen. And eventually, it did. Fast forward to about 10 minutes later, we're all still hiding when we hear a loud bang from down the hall. I instantly identified the sound as being a gunshot. Most of the class knew it as well. All of a sudden, we hear the little glass window of our door shatter. Gunshots began firing inside the room for nearly about 30 seconds. Thank God none of the bullets hit the closet door. The shooter, whoever they were, ran away, followed by more gunshots. This continued for around another good minute before we hear 3 or 4 men ordering for someone to get down on the ground. Turns out they were police officers. They put the man in cuffs and ordered the students out of the school. As we were walking out of the class, students flooded the hallway, bawling their eyes out, but surprisingly nobody was hurt. Ever since that day, nothing has ever happened to our school. I graduated soon after, and thank God as to how grateful I was to still be alive, as things could have turned out a whole lot worse.
Last year I was a senior in high school. During 5th period, I was a teacher's assistant for a science class. I would usually do whatever the teacher asked me to, like grading assignments or cleaning the lab tables. Other times, I would just do my homework or chill. It was a nice break from normal class. On this day, the science class went on a field trip, and I didn't really want to go, so the teacher let me stay back in her room and grade papers. I worked for about 20 minutes and then took a bathroom break. I got back to the room and began to grade more papers when the phone to the classroom rang. I picked it up. It was a recorded message from the principal sent to all classrooms saying they were going on lockdown as a suspicious male was seen on school grounds. I followed the directions and shut the door, locked it, and turned off all the lights. I was a little nervous being as I was all by myself in the classroom, but I knew the door was locked and I should be okay. I tried to take my mind off it by going back to grading papers. I turned on a little lamp on the desk for light. I got through about 3 more papers when I heard a noise come from the back of the classroom. The room was kinda big and had desks with lab tables behind them. I knew my mind was playing tricks on me and I kept working. Then I heard something again. This time I knew it wasn't my imagination. I looked closely around the classroom. When I got to the back corner lab table, I saw it. There was a man's shoe and part of his leg that I could barely see. I was frozen and didn't know what to do. I wanted to run for the door, but I didn't know if I could make it and unlock it in time if he chased me. The teacher's desk was kind of far from the door, but I knew I had to risk it. I didn't want to stay in the room with him. I counted to 3 and then got up and calmly walked to the door. About 3 steps from the door, and I heard more noise as if the man was getting up. At that point, I reached for the door as fast as I could, unlocked it and opened it. I slammed it shut behind me and ran as fast as I could down the hall. I heard the door open behind me. I saw the nearest staircase and ran upstairs hoping to lose the man if he was following me. I didn't even know if he was chasing me, but I was scared out of my mind. I got upstairs and pounded on the nearest classroom door. The teacher let me in after about 10 seconds. The man did not follow me upstairs. I got in the room and explained everything as fast as I could to the teacher, who then made a call to inform the principal. It ended up being too late and the man was able to escape. I figure he snuck in the classroom as I went to the bathroom, and I don't know if he had intentions to harm me or not, but I'm just glad that I'm okay.